Have you ever wondered why some people drain your energy without saying a word? Why certain family members leave you feeling hollow after every conversation? You tell yourself it's normal because that's what you've been conditioned to believe. You convince yourself that blood is thicker than water, but what if I told you that this loyalty is slowly killing who you really are? Carl Jung understood something most people refuse to face about family dynamics. Family can be the most dangerous source of psychological poison, not because they hate you, but because they need you to remain small. They require your diminishment to maintain their own sense of superiority and control. Today we're going to examine 5 red flags that Jung would never tolerate, even from those closest to him. Because sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones destroying you from within. This isn't about cutting people off without reason or becoming cold and heartless. This is about saving your soul from those who would consume it for their own comfort. This is about recognizing psychological warfare disguised as love. If you felt suffocated by those who should support you, this video will give you the clarity you desperately need. But be warned, what you learn here might change how you see your family forever. Some truths, once seen, cannot be unseen. Some patterns, once recognized, cannot be ignored. You've been taught that family comes first, no matter what they do to you, that you owe them your loyalty regardless of how they treat you or how they make you feel. This is the first lie that keeps you trapped in toxic dynamics that slowly erode your sense of self. This is the programming that makes you sacrifice your truth on the altar of false peace. Jung called this collective thinking, the dangerous belief that belonging matters more than being authentic. You sacrifice your truth to maintain peace that isn't really peace at all. You swallow your voice to avoid conflict, but the conflict still exists. It just moves inside you. But every time you do this, you betray yourself and hand over pieces of your psyche to keep others comfortable. Jung knew that the family system often functions as a psychological prison where individual growth is seen as betrayal, where questioning established patterns is treated as rebellion against the natural order, where becoming who you truly are threatens the established hierarchy that keeps everyone in their assigned roles, where your evolution is seen as their diminishment. The most destructive families aren't the ones that fight openly with screaming and obvious abuse. They're the ones that use love as a weapon, wielding it with surgical precision. They guilt you into submission with phrases like, "But we're family," and "After everything we've done for you." They weaponize your compassion against you and make you feel selfish for having basic human needs. This isn't love. This is emotional manipulation disguised as care, and it's far more dangerous than obvious hostility. Jung understood that true love supports individual growth and doesn't demand you remain the same to make others comfortable. Real family wants to see you become who you're meant to be, not who they need you to be for their own psychological stability. The difference between these two approaches is everything. Because when you start to see these patterns clearly, you realize something terrifying about your entire life. You've been living someone else's script, following someone else's narrative about who you should be. You've been playing a role that was written for you before you were even born, never questioning if it fits. And the people who benefit from this performance will fight viciously to keep you in character, even if it destroys you completely. Red flag number 1. They demand emotional availability without reciprocity. This is the most subtle and dangerous manipulation of all because it masquerades as normal family functioning. They call when they need comfort, support, validation, or someone to absorb their emotional chaos. But when you need the same support, they're suddenly busy, overwhelmed, or they minimize your problems. They have endless time for their own crises, but disappear completely when you're struggling with yours. Jung saw this pattern clearly, the emotional vampire who feeds on your energy while giving nothing back in return. They've conditioned you to believe this imbalance is normal, that being the family therapist is your designated role, that your feelings matter less than theirs, that your emotional needs are somehow less urgent or important. This isn't love or family duty. This is exploitation wrapped in familiarity. You've become their emotional emergency contact while they refuse to be yours, creating a one-way relationship that slowly drains your life force. Notice how they react when you're not immediately available to serve their emotional needs, when you don't instantly respond to their crisis, or when you dare to have your own problems that require attention. Suddenly you're selfish, ungrateful, distant, or you've changed in some negative way. They use guilt as a weapon because they know it works on your conditioned conscience. They know you'd rather sacrifice yourself than deal with their emotional manipulation and the chaos it creates. But Jung would ask you this crucial question that cuts to the heart of the matter. Why is your emotional well-being consistently less important than theirs in this family system? Why are you always the one who has to understand, forgive, accommodate, and absorb their emotional instability? Why do they get to have bad days, breakdowns, and emotional needs while you must always be strong and available? The answer is simple but painful. You've been trained to prioritize their comfort over your own sanity. This training started early and was reinforced consistently throughout your development. When you showed emotion as a child, you were told you were being dramatic, oversensitive, or attention-seeking. When they showed emotion, everyone had to stop everything and cater to their needs immediately. You learned that your role is to absorb their chaos while never expressing your own authentic feelings. You became the family's emotional shock absorber, and this dynamic will destroy you if you allow it to continue. Because you can't pour from an empty cup forever, no matter how much they demand it. Eventually, you'll have nothing left to give, and your well will run completely dry. And when that inevitable moment arrives, they won't ask why you're empty or how they contributed to your depletion. They'll simply ask why you're not filling their cup anymore and blame you for failing in your role. Red flag number 2, they punish your growth and success. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, was life's greatest challenge and most important work. But some families see your growth as a personal attack on their choices and lifestyle. When you start eating healthier, they mock your diet phase and try to sabotage your efforts. When you set boundaries, they call you difficult, selfish, or claim you think you're better than them. When you succeed in any area of life, they find ways to diminish it or redirect attention back to themselves. This isn't simple jealousy or natural sibling rivalry. This is fear manifesting as sabotage. Your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation and lack of progress. Your success highlights their failures and missed opportunities in ways that make them deeply uncomfortable. Your boundaries expose their manipulation tactics that previously worked without question. They need you to stay small because your growth threatens their control and the family dynamic they've carefully constructed. They've built their identity around being needed, being the wise one, the successful one, or the perfect example. When you start becoming your own person and finding your own path, their entire narrative begins to crumble. So they sabotage you, not with obvious attacks that could be easily identified, but with subtle poison administered in small doses. Don't get too big for your britches, they say, or remember where you came from when you achieve something. Success changes people, they warn, as if becoming successful is a disease that will corrupt your character. These phrases are carefully designed to keep you contained and make you feel guilty for outgrowing their limitations. Jung would recognize this immediately as the collective unconscious trying to pull the individual back down to the group level. The family system has an immune response to change, and when one person starts growing, the system attacks to restore the old balance. They'll use shame, guilt, fear, or whatever psychological weapon works to get you back in line and playing your assigned role. They'll remind you of past failures with surgical precision, bringing up old mistakes when you're feeling confident. They'll predict future disasters and failures, planting seeds of doubt about your abilities and judgment. They'll make you doubt yourself and your decisions by questioning your motives and competence. Because a confident, successful you is extremely dangerous to their control and the family hierarchy they've established. Notice carefully how they react to your genuine achievements and positive life changes. Do they celebrate genuinely without inserting themselves into your success story? Or do they immediately find the flaw, the potential problem, or the reason it won't last? Do they support your dreams and ambitions? Or do they list all the reasons you'll fail? Healthy families lift each other up and celebrate individual success as a family victory, while toxic families tear each other down to maintain their own position. Red flag number 3, they use guilt and obligation as control mechanisms. After everything I've done for you, these words are weapons designed to control your choices through emotional manipulation. Family should come first, they declare, when you make decisions they don't approve of. You're abandoning us, they cry when you establish healthy boundaries or pursue your own path. These phrases are carefully crafted psychological tools designed to control your behavior through manufactured guilt. Jung understood that guilt is the most effective prison because the victim locks themselves in willingly. They don't need to threaten you directly when they can make you threaten yourself with your own conscience. They've programmed you to feel responsible for their emotions and to believe that their happiness depends entirely on your compliance. This is a fundamental lie that keeps you enslaved to their will and trapped in patterns that serve their needs. You are not responsible for managing anyone else's emotional state, and you never were. You didn't ask to be born, and you don't owe them your life as payment for theirs. Yet they've convinced you otherwise through years of conditioning and emotional manipulation. They've made you believe that setting boundaries is selfish, that pursuing your dreams is abandonment, and that living your own life is a betrayal of family loyalty. This guilt programming starts very early in childhood with seemingly innocent but deeply damaging messages. Look how sad you made, Mommy, they say when you express your own needs. Daddy works so hard for you, they remind you when you don't show enough gratitude. We sacrificed everything for you becomes the constant refrain that follows you into adulthood. These messages create an emotional debt in your mind that can never be fully repaid. Because the goal was never payment, the goal was always control over your choices and behavior. They don't actually want you to pay them back for their parental responsibilities. They want you to stay emotionally indebted forever, always owing them something that keeps you under their influence. Notice how they strategically bring up past sacrifices when you're making independent choices or asserting your autonomy. How they remind you of their love and past kindnesses when you're trying to set limits or boundaries. This isn't love speaking. This is manipulation using love as a mask. Because real love doesn't keep a detailed ledger of every sacrifice and kindness. Real love doesn't demand payment for basic parental responsibilities that they chose to take on. They chose to have children, and they chose to provide care. That was their obligation as parents, not your debt as a child. Jung knew that individuation requires breaking free from these invisible chains of manufactured obligation. But they've made the chains feel like love, like family loyalty, like basic human decency. That's exactly why it's so psychologically difficult to escape, and why so many people remain trapped in these dynamics their entire lives. The prison feels like home because it's all you've ever known. Red flag number 4, they dismiss or minimize your feelings and experiences. You're being too sensitive, they say, when you express hurt or disappointment. That didn't happen the way you remember it, they insist when you bring up past incidents. Your overreacting becomes their standard response to your emotional expressions. These phrases are specifically designed to make you question your own reality and doubt your perceptions. Jung called this the systematic invalidation of inner experience, a form of psychological warfare. When people consistently dismiss your feelings, they're teaching you to distrust yourself completely, to doubt your own perceptions, your own memory, your own emotional responses to situations. This isn't guidance or help. This is a deliberate attempt to control what you're allowed to see and feel about your own life. This gaslighting serves a very specific purpose in maintaining their control over the family narrative. It keeps you dependent on their version of reality instead of trusting your own experience. If you can't trust your own feelings, you have to rely on theirs for emotional guidance. If you can't trust your own memories, you have to accept their version of events as the official truth. This is how they maintain psychological control, even when you're not physically around them, because they've successfully moved into your head and become the critical voice that questions every feeling, every boundary, every truth you try to establish. They've installed themselves as the ultimate authority on your own experience, making you doubt what you know to be true about your own life. Jung understood that your emotions are valuable data about your experience in the world. They're information about what's happening to you and around you that deserves attention and respect. When someone consistently dismisses this emotional data, they're stealing your ability to navigate life effectively. They're forcing you to live in their constructed reality instead of your own authentic experience. This creates a dangerous split in your psyche that Jung would recognize immediately. Part of you knows the truth about what happened and how you feel about it, but another part of you has been trained to deny that truth and accept their alternative narrative. This internal conflict is mentally and emotionally exhausting, and it's why you feel crazy or confused around them. It's why you doubt yourself constantly and can't trust your own instincts about people and situations, because they've systematically destroyed your relationship with your inner voice and made you believe that their judgment is more reliable than your own direct experience. This is one of the most damaging things one human being can do to another, and it's often done by people who claim to love you. Red flag number 5, they refuse to respect boundaries or acknowledge wrongdoing. This is the ultimate test of whether you're dealing with a healthy or toxic family dynamic. Healthy people can accept boundaries without taking them personally or becoming defensive. They can acknowledge mistakes, take responsibility for their actions, and apologize genuinely when they've caused harm. They view boundaries as information about your needs rather than attacks on their character. Toxic people see boundaries as personal attacks and direct challenges to their authority. They view apologies as weakness and admissions of defeat rather than opportunities for growth and healing. They interpret your limits as personal rejections and evidence that you don't love them anymore. Jung knew this was the mark of the unconscious personality. Someone so completely identified with their ego that any challenge feels like total annihilation. Someone so fragile that they cannot admit fault because their entire identity depends on being right, being perfect, being above criticism. They cannot respect boundaries because they don't see you as a separate person with your own needs and rights. You're an extension of their will, a character in their story, a supporting actor in their personal drama. When you try to establish independence and assert your own needs, they panic completely, not because they'll miss your presence, but because they're losing control over their environment. They'll escalate their manipulation tactics and use every weapon in their psychological arsenal: guilt, fear, shame, anger, threats, silent treatment, whatever has worked in the past to bring you back in line. They'll recruit other family members to pressure you and create a united front against your autonomy. You're tearing the family apart, they'll say, making you responsible for the dysfunction you're trying to escape. You've changed, they'll observe, as if growth and healing were character defects rather than positive developments. You don't love us anymore, they'll accuse, making your need for boundaries evidence of diminished affection. These accusations are designed to make you abandon your boundaries and return to accepting unacceptable treatment, to make you feel guilty for wanting basic respect and human dignity in your relationships. But Jung would remind you of something absolutely crucial that cuts through all the emotional manipulation. Your need for boundaries isn't the problem. Their inability to respect them is the real issue. You're not destroying the family by protecting yourself from harmful treatment and toxic dynamics. They destroyed healthy family functioning long ago by refusing to treat you with basic dignity and respect. A healthy family system bends without breaking when members grow and change. It adapts to individual development while maintaining loving connection and mutual support. A toxic family system is rigid and demands absolute compliance, punishing growth and treating love as a transaction with conditions that can never be fully met. Jung spent his entire career studying the human psyche and understanding how early family experiences shape our entire lives. He understood that the family is where we first learn about power, love, worth, and our place in the world. When that foundation is poisoned with manipulation, control, and conditional love, it affects everything else in our lives. Your relationships, your career, your self-image, your ability to trust, everything becomes filtered through the lens of early psychological damage. But here's what Jung also knew with absolute certainty. Awareness is the beginning of freedom from these destructive patterns. When you can see the manipulation clearly, it begins to lose its power over your decisions and emotions. When you can name the toxic behaviors, they can no longer operate in the shadows of your unconscious mind. When you can trust your own experience again, you can start the process of healing and reclaiming your authentic self. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to cut everyone off completely or burn all bridges with your family, but it absolutely means you have to stop sacrificing yourself to maintain toxic dynamics that are slowly destroying your mental health. You have to choose your own psychological well-being over their comfort and their need to keep you in a diminished role. You have to protect your energy from those who would drain it without offering anything positive in return. Even if they share your blood, especially if they share your blood, because family dysfunction runs deeper than any other kind of psychological damage. It gets into your bones and shapes your nervous system from the earliest age. It becomes the water you swim in without even realizing you're slowly drowning in toxicity. But you don't have to drown in their dysfunction. You can learn to swim in healthier waters. You can find the surface of authentic relationships and breathe the fresh air of mutual respect. You can create the family you choose rather than accepting the family you were assigned. Jung believed that every person has the fundamental right to become who they truly are, not who their family needs them to be for their own psychological comfort. Not who society expects them to be based on outdated scripts and limiting beliefs, but who they are in their deepest essence, their most authentic self, their truest expression of human potential. This is the work of individuation that Jung wrote about extensively. This is the path to psychological freedom that requires courage, determination, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. It's the hardest work you'll ever do because it means being misunderstood, being called selfish, being blamed for destroying family harmony. But it's also the most important work because your life depends on it. Your sanity depends on it. Your ability to love and be loved authentically depends on it. You cannot give what you don't have within yourself. You cannot love others genuinely if you've never learned to love yourself properly. You cannot maintain healthy relationships if you've never experienced what healthy actually looks like in practice. The family that raised you may have been your first teachers about relationships and love, but they don't have to be your last teachers if what they taught you was toxic and destructive. You can learn new patterns of relating that honor your worth and dignity. You can create new dynamics based on mutual respect rather than control and manipulation. You can choose the family you keep around you based on how they treat you rather than genetic connections. Blood may be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than peace, mental health, or basic human dignity. It's not more important than your psychological well-being or your right to live authentically. It's not worth sacrificing your soul to maintain relationships that diminish rather than enhance your life. Jung knew this difficult truth that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from toxicity. Sometimes protection requires physical and emotional distance from those who cannot respect your boundaries. Sometimes healing demands separation from those who refuse to acknowledge the harm they've caused. This isn't cruelty, abandonment, or failure to forgive. This is intelligent self-preservation. This is choosing life over death, growth over stagnation, health over dysfunction, authenticity over performance. If you recognize these red flags in your own family dynamics, know that you're not alone in this struggle. Know that your feelings are completely valid and your observations are accurate. Know that you deserve so much better than what you've been accepting as normal. Know that it's absolutely possible to break these generational cycles of dysfunction and heal these deep wounds, to create the life and relationships you actually want, rather than settling for what you've always known. But it starts with seeing clearly and honestly what is actually happening in your family system. It starts with naming the toxic behaviors and refusing to minimize or excuse them anymore. It starts with choosing yourself and your well-being over their comfort and their need to keep you small. Even when it hurts, even when they don't understand, even when they make you feel guilty for finally putting your own oxygen mask on first. Jung's message was crystal clear. You have one life and one chance to become who you really are. Don't waste it trying to be who others need you to be for their own psychological comfort. Don't sacrifice your truth for their comfort or betray yourself to maintain their illusions about family harmony. The cost is far too high, and the price is your very soul. And no family relationship is worth that ultimate sacrifice, no matter how much they claim to love you, no matter how much history you share or how guilty they make you feel for finally choosing yourself. Your life is yours to live according to your own values and vision. Your path is yours to walk without needing anyone's permission or approval. Your truth is yours to speak without apology or justification. And anyone who tries to take that fundamental freedom away from you doesn't deserve access to your energy, your time, or your presence. Protect yourself fiercely, trust yourself completely, and choose yourself consistently. Jung would be proud of your courage to break free from generational patterns of dysfunction and create something healthier for yourself and future generations. Like these insights on toxic family dynamics and Jungian psychology? Smash that like button to boost this video on Carl Jung, toxic family signs, and setting boundaries. Subscribe for weekly tips on self-growth, mental health, and breaking generational cycles. Comment which red flag hit you hardest. Your story helps others find this content.